Hey guys, tonight we descend into the dimly lit corridors of Imperial Rome's most scandalous court, where torchlight flickers against marble statues and the scent of rosewater and spilled wine drifts through the air. You wander past gilded halls crowded with masked revelers, the faint echo of laughter tinged with hushed moans and clinking goblets. Trust me, you probably won't survive this orgy of power and pleasure unscathed. Feel the velvet tapestries brush your shoulder as whispers swirl like smoke in a wine cellar, and notice how every footstep echoes a promise of excess. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see who's joining in live from midnight feasts and who's sneaking earbuds at breakfast. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip past a row of smoking torches, your footfalls muffled by crimson carpets stained dark with wine and secrets. The cool marble pillars hum with the echo of riotous laughter, and every breath tastes faintly of spiced figs. As you wander deeper, an emperor in a silk robe lounges on a chaise draped with peacock feathers, chanting invitations to drink, dance, and worship. You glance at the mosaics above tales of conquest, painted in gold, wondering if those fallen heroes ever faced a night quite like this. Your pulse quickens, and you hope your toga is still securely fastened. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, Caligula took the throne in AD 37, succeeding his adoptive grandfather, Emperor Tiberius, at the age of just 25. Historians know he reigned from March 37 until his assassination in January 41, a mere 1,460 days that somehow contained enough scandal to last 10 lifetimes. Yet amid the official records coins stamped with his stern profile and inscriptions, touting peace treaties, whispers of his nocturnal escapades spread faster than gladiators' rumors in the forum. You swallow hard, realizing an emperor's job description back then included more than commanding legions. Those legendary parties in the imperial palace combined goblets, brimming with Falernian vintage as silk curtains billow in candlelight. Musicians play haunting lyres while servants offer trays of honeyed dormice, and courtiers swaying to flute melodies risk stumbling into pools of perfumed water. A gentle prank might involve a hidden slit in the labyrinth, like Hall, where a sudden gush of rosewater soaks anyone showing an overabundance of decorum. Jokes on them sauce-stained robes were the latest fashion, and you probably didn't bring an extra outfit. Legend even claims he planned to make his beloved horse Incitatus a consular anecdote so wild it might be satire, yet Suetonius swears he built a marble stable complete with an ivory manger. The animal dined on oats mixed with gold flakes and wore a jeweled collar that clinked softly when he trotted by. Quirky as it sounds, this fringe tidbit reflects the emperor's flair for the absurd, and perhaps a jab at Rome's senatorial pomposity. You shake your head, picturing a ministerial meeting where a horse might neigh its decree. Then there are the rumors of incest, his close bond with his sister Drusilla blossoming into something historians still whisper about in midnight seminars. Some accounts describe secret trysts behind velvet screens, couched in shadow and perfumed steam, while mainstream chroniclers mention his ruthless glory in battle and political maneuvers. The rumor mill churns with tales too lurid for polite company. You press a hand to your chest as if warding off a scandalous breeze, reminding yourself that even in Rome, not every whisper survives daylight scrutiny. Historians still argue whether his perversions were madness or calculated power plays. Was he a deranged puppet controlled by fear, or a cunning tactician using shock to solidify absolute obedience? Official records praise his generosity, paid legions early, and hosted gladiatorial games so lavish that the Colosseum nearly buckled under demand. Yet the subversive undercurrent of his nocturnal indulgences hints at something darker. You wonder if every extravagant feast was a test, binding Senate members to secrecy and shame. By candlelight, you glimpse gilded couches strewn with rose petals and exotic feathers, where masked guests whisper secrets into blossoms, and half-naked dancers move like waves across polished floors. Servants sprinkle saffron into perfumed baths, and laughter flutters like moths around torches. A jester cracks a joke that almost distracts you until you realize you're at the center of the stage, the next unwilling performer in an emperor's private theater. Don't trip on that spilled wine. Caligula will expect a standing ovation, and heaven forbid you appear ungrateful. He even built a secret shrine called Laetitia Sacra, dedicated not to a Roman deity, but to his own image, where ambassadors knelt before a life-size statue presenting him as a godlike figure. Fringe accounts suggest he demanded nightly sacrifices of roses and poetry from trembling envoys. The walls bore inscriptions proclaiming him Lord of Laughter. The air crackled with expectation, pleasure for some, terror for others. You can almost hear the whispered pleas of dignitaries praying for mercy, wondering whether to bow or bolt. Still, a bizarre note remains. Some sources claim Caligula bathed in the blood of sacrificial animals, an extreme fringe story many scholars dismiss as propaganda, yet it clings to his legend like fig residue on a fruit shallow. Whether fact or fancy, it underscores the emperor's reputation for excess. You wipe an imagined drop of crimson from your lip, telling yourself you'll stick to safer bedtime tales like friendly lions in the Colosseum. But the emperor's carnality lingers, drawing you deeper into a world where moral bounds vanish like coins in a fountain. As you step back into the corridor, the torchlight dims behind you, and the scent of jasmine mingles with rosewater in your nostrils, an intoxicating reminder that some stories refuse to fade. Ahead, another throne awaits, belonging to a king whose appetites rival even Caligula's, but that, dear listener, will have to wait until next time. For now, hold on to the memory of flickering candles, hushed moans, and the emperor's silver laughter echoing in empty halls. You wander down a torchlit corridor draped in crimson tapestries, the air thick with the spicy scent of roasted venison and melted wax. Each footstep echoes against the stone floor as you approach a grand oak door carved with Tudor roses and pomegranates, the emblem of a king who prized both power and progeny. Push it open, and you're enveloped by the warm glow of a massive hearth, where courtiers clad in velvet doublets and embroidered gowns murmur like restless bees. You settle onto an ornate bench, the polished wood cool beneath your fingertips, and brace yourself for the matrimonial whirlwind that is Henry VIII's court. Trust me, you're about to feel like an extra on the world's most scandalous dating show. Henry VIII ascended the English throne in April 1509 at just 17, succeeding his father, Henry VII, and reigned until his death in January 1547. 38-year stretch marked by ambition, extravagance, and an appetite for marriage that would put any rom-com marathon to shame. Mainstream records boast his 6 official marriages: Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr, while fringe gossip whispers of late-night assignations with countless mistresses. You lean in, imagining the clink of goblets as the king toasts yet another bride of the week. Historians still argue whether his serial matrimony stemmed from genuine romantic longing or a calculated bid for a male heir and dynastic security. A faint breeze drifts through a stained glass window, carrying the scent of freshly baked almond pastries and clipped lawn where jousting lists once stood. You almost expect to see a Tinder-style swipe right for annulment sign scribbled on the wall. Modern asides aside, the king's quest for wives was serious business. His desperate desire for a legitimate son led him to break with Rome when Pope Clement VII refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, an act that birthed the Church of England. That bold move feels less like pious conviction and more like the world's first royal breakup text. It's not me, It's you, goodbye, Pope. You stifle a grin at the thought. Inside the lavish Great Hall at Hampton Court, tapestries depicting the story of Abraham hang beside portraits of the 6 queens. Each face wears its own story. Catherine's resolute gaze, Anne Boleyn's coy half-smile, Jane's serene countenance. You wonder if these women posed willingly, or if the royal painter had to dodge flying muffs. A fringe tidbit drifts through. The court's rumor mill. Henry once challenged his courtiers to a kissing contest at a masquerade ball, where masked guests lined up to plant a peck on his cheek, flax beards and all. You shiver, picturing the aftermath of too many beard-to-lip collisions. The clatter of a silver platter interrupts your thoughts as a footman offers spiced wine flutes. You take a hesitant sip, sweet, warm, with an undercurrent of clove that tickles your nose. The conversation shifts to Catherine Howard, the teenage bride whose youthful flirtations scandalize the court. You almost chortle imagining her sending Henry heart-shaped lutes carved from ivory. Yet her fate executed in 1542 for alleged adultery serves as a grim reminder that royal romance came with high stakes. You press your palm to your heart, grateful to live in an age where the worst sentence for a bad date is block notifications. Amid this swirl of opulence, another peculiar tale emerges. Henry supposedly imported an exotic aphrodisiac bird from the New World, feeding it saffron and rose hips to produce eggs believed to enhance virility. Whether you buy that or chalk it up to Tudor spin, the image of a fattened exotic fowl perched on a silver tray speaks volumes about the era's blend of science and spectacle. You almost want to Instagram it with a hashtag Tudor life tag, but decide better of it, your phone simply wouldn't exist for another 3 centuries. As the torchlight dances off gold leaf ceilings, a hush falls when the topic turns to Anne Boleyn's grand masque, where the queen danced in a gown adorned with pearls the size of marbles. Court poets praised her like a demi-goddess, but whispers claimed the king preferred the dim light of after-party chambers, away from prying eyes and public duties. Historians still argue whether those clandestine meetings were true romantic encounters or tactical displays of royal favor designed to manipulate alliances. You tug at your sleeve, suddenly aware that every pirouette and whispered compliment carried diplomatic weight. A harpist's gentle chords fill the hall as Henry strides in, his crimson velvet doublet trimmed with ermine, his gaze scanning the room like a man auditioning candidates for a personal court. You feel the temperature spike. He's a big presence, equal parts charisma and royal decree. He raises a jeweled goblet and toasts to love, legacy, and lively company, then gestures toward you with a playful glint in his eye. Don't blush, you're just a humble spectator, but you can't help imagining the ballads that might follow such an introduction. 5 love letters to each queen, at least, and you're not even on the guest list at the fireworks of Henry's romantic exploits crackle brighter than any state-sponsored display. He fell deeply for Jane Seymour, who gave him the longed-for son, Edward VI, only to die days later, an event so bittersweet it's practically a period drama cliffhanger. You can almost hear the cello swell. Then came the politically expedient match to Anne of Cleves, arranged at the height of Protestant alliances, though after meeting her, Henry famously quipped that she looked nothing like her portrait. An open debate rages over whether his marriage to Anne was a genuine misstep or a strategic gambit to court English reformers. You shrug, romantic or political, matrimonial alliances always carried more plot twists than any soap opera you've binged. By the time Catherine Parr arrives on the scene, you might think Henry's calendar is full, but he still hosted midnight feasts where he challenged ladies in waiting to a kiss-and-tell storytelling contest. Quirky as it sounds, this absurd form of court entertainment united gossip and gallantry in equal measure. You nudge your neighbor if you had one, knowing you'd never survive that gauntlet. The torchlight dims as the scene fades, but the echoes of Henry VIII's marital mayhem resonate like a distant lute chord. You lean back, letting the memory of clinking goblets and perfumed gowns linger in your mind. Ahead waits another throne, eager to reveal its own brand of excess. But that, dear listener, is a story for later. You slip out of Hampton Court's flickering glow and find yourself in a chilly medieval courtyard, moonlight glinting off damp cobblestones. The night air carries the distant bleat of a sheep and the faint aroma of wet straw mixed with wood. Smoke a humble stage for a drama of royal passion and political peril. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders, bracing against a breeze that feels conspiratorial, as though it's carrying secrets from the castle towers above. Tonight, the star isn't a queen but a king whose affection set England's nobility ablaze with envy and outrage. Edward II, crowned in January 1308 at age 25, inherits more than a crown when his father, Edward I, dies. He also inherits a love for the charismatic Piers Gaveston, a knight so favored that courtiers whisper his name like a forbidden spell. Mainstream chronicles note that Edward lavished Gaveston with the earldom of Cornwall and lands that should have gone to royal blood, an unprecedented gift that made barons grind their teeth in the cold night air. You shiver, picturing the look on a jealous earl's face when Gaveston sachets into court in silks dyed the deepest purple, flaunting leonine fur-trimmed collars and a grin that could melt frost. Modern asides aside, imagine a medieval equivalent of a power couple, but replace Instagram with illuminated manuscripts and photo filters with actual gold leaf. Edward and Gaveston stroll hand in hand, yes, hand in hand through garden groves, tasting ripened cherries off low branches, whispering courtly love poems to each other by lantern light. You raise an eyebrow, wondering how many cherries they actually sampled and whether they shared the last one. Fringe tailies even claim they staged mock jousts on hobby horses in the royal nursery, an odd courtly sport that involved rubber chickens. If you squint your imagination hard enough, historians still argue whether Edward's bond with Gaveston was purely romantic or also a savvy political play to cement his own authority. Some scholars suggest that by crowning Gaveston with power, Edward aimed to create a loyal faction strong enough to counterbalance overbearing barons. Others insist this was a genuine love match that broke every rule in the medieval playbook. You shrug and rub your chin, deciding that real or imagined, love and politics have always been awkward roommates. As you wander past ivy-clad walls, the scent of night-blooming jasmine fights with the unmistakable musk of damp wool cloaks. Torches gutter in iron sconces, spotlighting gaunt faces of knights on horseback, their visors down in somber protest. You slip past them, careful not to trip on a trailing hem, and enter the great hall of Carlisle, where court gossip crackles. Like braziers, and the aristocracy gathers to debate war, tax levies, and apparently the king's bedtime habits. A sudden burst of laughter rings out as someone recalls a quirky tidbit. Gaveston apparently kept a collection of pet ferrets he dressed in miniaturized knightly armor, parading them before guests to comic effect. You stifle a snort, picturing armored ferrets scuttling across banquet tables, sending goblets toppling like dominoes. The nobles might have seen it as a ridiculous distraction, but you know a good ferret show could lighten any stiff court provided. You're not the one wearing the splashed wine. But then the talk turns dark. Gaveston's return from exile. In 1312, after Edward pleads to the Pope, not for mercy or sanctuary, but specifically to restore his beloved's lands and titles. Feel a tug of sympathy tinged with alarm. Would you fight for someone whose whims reshape kingdoms? The barons, fed up with Gaveston's insolence, capture and behead him in June 1312. Mainstream sources record the date precisely June 19th, to be exact, when the Earl of Cornwall's head was sent in a silver cauldron to the Queen as a grim souvenir. You swallow hard, the cold marble bench suddenly too hard for comfort. In the weeks that follow, Edward wanders castle corridors in mourning, clad in sackcloth, weeping openly. Historians still argue whether those tears marked true grief or a theatrical display meant to shame the nobility into submission. You glimpse the king kneeling before his late favorite's tomb, whispering vows of undying devotion in a voice so hushed you strain to catch every syllable. There's something achingly human about it. Even centuries removed love and loss, power and vulnerability often make for the most combustible mix. Then enters Hugh Despenser the Younger, another handsome courtier who captures Edward's eye with clever quips and unwavering loyalty. You imagine late-night trysts in tower chambers lit by a single taper shadows, dancing on stone walls as Despenser reads sonnets by candlelight, his voice a soft murmur against the king's sighs. Fringe rumors claim that the two kept a secret tunnel between their quarters, complete with trapdoors and secret passwords, an escape route worthy of any romance novel. You giggle, picturing yourself squeezing through damp tunnels, only to emerge covered in mud and rat droppings, hardly the ambience for courtly love. As Despenser's influence grows, barons seethe once more. They accuse him of pocketing taxes, corrupting royal justice, and escorting the king into the royal bedchamber with ribbons tied, whatever that scandalous phrase really implies. You smirk at the mental image lace ribbons and all but wince at the prospect of political fallout. By 1321, discontent boils over into open rebellion, forcing Edward to choose, side with his barons or stand by his lover. He chooses Despenser, sparking civil war that rends England's tapestry like a fraying seam. The candlelit court becomes a war council by day and a hushed sanctuary by night. You trail behind Edward as he paces war maps spread across long oak tables, fingers stained with ink and intrigue. The air smells of ink, sweat, and damp leather as he consults Despenser in a hushed tone, a partnership of monarch and favorite that blurs private passion with statecraft. Your heart flutters at their closeness, even as you cringe at the baronial banners rippling outside battlements. Ultimately, Edward's stubborn defense of Despenser leads to his capture in 1326 by Queen Isabella and her ally, Roger Mortimer. Exiled north, Edward spends his final months in quiet despair, his candle dying as his reign flickers out in January 1327. A mainstream detail. On January 20, 1327, he abdicates in favor of his son, Edward III, marking one of the first forced abdications in English history. You sigh, recognizing how love and loyalty can topple thrones as easily as armies do. Yet the whispered stories of Edward's private chambers persist. Soft velvet sheets, fragrant oils, and murmurings of sweet nothings traded like precious coins. Fringed tailies speak of love letters penned on parchment dipped in rosewater, so scented that courtiers could identify Despenser's handwriting blindfolded. You inhale deeply, wishing you could catch a whiff of that long-ago perfume. Edward II's tale closes on a cautionary note. Love that defies convention can be intoxicating, but when it intertwines with power, the stakes become deadly. You step back into the moonlit courtyard, the scent of wet straw replaced by hush and heartbreak. Ahead lies another throne, awaiting its own saga of desire and downfall. But that, dear listener, is a story for later. You step across centuries and find yourself beneath the glittering arches of the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, where sunlight fractures into 1,000 rainbows dancing on marble floors. The air is thick with the sweet tang of crystallized sugar, sculptures and the soft rustle of silk skirts, and you nearly trip over a gilded slipper left by a flustered courtier. Remember that horse feasting on gold-flaked oats? Here, it's courtiers who glisten like liquid gold. You lean against a cool column at surface, polished by centuries of secretive sighs, and ready yourself for a different kind of royal spectacle. Louis XV, known as the Beloved, Le Bien Aimé, began his reign at just 5 years old in September 1715, after the death of his great-grandfather Louis XIV, and continued as France's monarch until 1774. Mainstream historians note that his was one of the longest reigns in French history, spanning nearly 60 years of Baroque excess. Yet behind palace pomp, the king nurtured a more illicit habit, the Parc aux Cerfs, a seemingly pastoral patch of land far from prying eyes, where young women were allegedly housed for his private amusements. You can almost hear the rustle of chiffon as these clandestine guests slip through hidden garden gates. As you wander past topiary hedges clipped into the shapes of griffins and eagles, a servant shushes you. This place isn't on any public tour. You crouch beside a marble fountain shaped like Neptune, its waters perfumed with lavender, and peer around a corner to spy a discreet pavilion lit by dozens of candles. Fringe whispers claim the king designed secret underground tunnels linking his private chambers to these pavilions, allowing him to slip away from state councils after a stiff decree just to indulge in something softer. You shiver, convinced that even the marble walls here have ears. You pause, inhaling a breeze scented with orange blossom and curiosities. A valet glides past, carrying a platter of candied violets and sugar-coated almonds shaped like little crowns. You grasp one with trembling fingers. Tastes like royal ambition, drizzled with honey, and wonder how many of these almonds closed more hearts than treaties. Joke's on you. An almond lasts longer in your mouth than most of Louis's political alliances. In the marble corridor ahead, gilded portraits of Louis XIV stare down with disapproval. But here and there, you spot portraits of Madame de Pompadour, the king's official maîtresse in tighter. She's painted with powdered wig towering like a bird's nest, pearls trailing down her bodice like French fries in a fast food tray, decadent, indulgent, and oddly comforting. You smile at the thought. Everyone loves fries, even in the court of Versailles. Historians still argue whether Pompadour's influence on politics outweighed her impact on fashion, but no one bets against her when it comes to style. The corridor opens into a rose-lined courtyard known as the Petit Parc, where rumor says the Parc aux Cerfs once flourished with innocent white tents. Mainstream accounts confirm that between 1745 and 1751, dozens of young women, some as young as 17, were discreetly ferried to these tents under cover of night. Whether they were volunteers or coerced remains a point of scholarly contention. Historians still argue whether the king's secret lovers shared bouts of genuine affection or served only as fleeting ornaments in his lonely palace. You tuck a stray rose petal behind your ear, romantic, until you recall petals get stuck in your hair. A sudden giggle drifts to your ears, and you twitch as if you've been caught snooping. It's not the laughter of nobles, but a young woman practicing her verses. A fringe anecdote suggests Louis himself rewarded poetry recitals with pearls filched from his mother's collection, an extravagant gesture that left the ex-queen's brooch mysteriously lighter. You smirk, imagining pearls rolling across Versailles' polished floors like tiny moons escaping orbit. You step through a hidden door, no handle, just a subtle relief carving of a fleur-de-lis, and enter a dimly lit boudoir, adorned with crimson silks and golden tassels. Velvet cushions crowd the floor, and two flutes of perfumed wine stand on a low table. The scent of jasmine and musk wraps around you like an affectionate handshake. You pour yourself a sip, cool, sweet, with a hint of clove, and glance at a gilded mirror reflecting your wide-eyed face. Don't worry, no one's watching, or are they? A valet's whispered voice recounts a quirky detail. Louis reportedly kept a pet monarch iguana named Flamberge, which slithered across carpets during dinners, much to the horror of dessert-loving courtiers. You imagine candied eclairs toppled by a nonchalant reptile, an image more chaotic than your last pizza delivery. The anecdote underscores the king's taste for novelty. Why dine with mortals when you can dine with a bejeweled lizard? Beyond these silk-draped walls, discussions of war, financing of the 7 Years' War, and Enlightenment ideas buzz in salons lit by crystal chandeliers. Yet here, in the boudoir's hush, politics yield to pleasure. Historians still argue whether the king's private diversions weakened his governance or simply offered a humanizing respite from the demands of statecraft. You settle onto a cushion, drawing the silk folds around you like a security blanket, contemplating that delicate balance. A faint tapping leads your gaze upward. On a small shelf rests a crystal decanter filled with a pale liquid called eau de l'infidèle, supposedly concocted to enhance desire. You uncork it, sharp notes of bergamot and rose hit your nose, and imagine courtiers dabbling it behind ears before attendants at royal beds. Whether it truly worked or was mere tobacco and saffron. Snake oil remains lost to legend, but its presence here speaks volumes about the period's blend of chemistry and charm. Suddenly, the distant echo of a harp drifts through a peephole, a serenade for one of the Park aux Cerfs' residents. You press your ear to the wood, catching a verse. My lord, thy gaze doth set my heart ablaze. You can't help but chuckle. Who knew 18th century love songs could predate your favorite streaming playlist? Then you remember to exhale. This is Versailles, where the boundary between spectacle and sincerity often blur like watercolor in rain. You rise, the silk cushion clinging to your robes, and drift back through the secret door. Outside, the sky has turned to lavender twilight, and the mirrors reflect the first stars. You pause in the Hall of Mirrors, catching your breath as you recall earlier sagas, walls soaked in Roman debauchery, English courts awash with marital drama, and tunnels of forbidden love. Now Louis XV's hidden boudoirs join the chorus of regal excess, reminding you that royal bedrooms have always been stages for politics, passion, and paranoia. Ahead lies one final throne, waiting to spill its own sordid secrets. But that, dear listener, will have to wait until next time. You cross a sea of years and find yourself in the shadowed courtyards of Topkapi Palace, where the call to prayer echoes off whitewashed walls and the scent of orange blossom mingles with the spice of freshly ground cardamom. Moonlight glints on tiled roofs as you wander past carved wooden screens that rustle softly in a warm Anatolian breeze. Every step carries a murmur of silk remnants of the Sultan's retinue and the distant laughter of concubines drifting through lattice windows. You pause at a low marble fountain, its waters reflecting the sky freckled with stars, and steel yourself for the final royal spectacle, the reign of Sultan Ibrahim I, known to history as the Mad. Ibrahim I ascended the Ottoman throne on August 1, 1640, at the age of 23, and ruled until his deposition on August 8, 1648, a brief 8 years marked by extravagance, instability, and tales of licentious excess. Mainstream chronicles record that his erratic behavior prompted the Imperial Council of Viziers to remove him, replacing him with his brother, Mehmed IV. Yet amid the official court, records ledgers of diplomatic gifts and grain shipments, the legend of his perversions pulses with life, leaping from harem whispers into European ambassadorial dispatches. Historians still argue whether these lurid tales were truth or politically motivated slander, designed to justify his overthrow. You skirt a marble column carved with tulips and carnations, symbols of imperial authority, and glimpse a row of low divans draped in ruby red velvet. A servant sets down a tray of sherbet in Venetian crystal cups. As you lift one, cool sweetness coats your tongue, mingling rose and sour pomegranate. You remember Caligula's marble stable and Henry VIII's exotic eggs, and wonder if even those extravagances could rival the Sultan's whimsy. Legend tells that Ibrahim once commanded his concubines to parade nude at dawn, each wearing nothing but a jeweled collar, while eunuchs whispered poetry into their ears through brass megaphones. You imagine the awkward glare of the sunrise, the hushed gasps of visiting dignitaries, and the distant bleat of palace goats, an absurd pantomime that made the harem walls blush. A fringe anecdote even claims he kept a troupe of acrobatic monkeys, dressed in miniature uniforms to entertain his favorite odalisques. turning the courtyard into a bizarre circus beneath the crescent moon dot as you continue. The mosaic floors creak beneath your sandals, and the hush of the harem wraps around you. Like a velvet cloak, you slip behind an intricately latticed screen and peer into a private chamber, its walls hung with emerald green brocade. A divan piled with ostrich feather cushions invites you to rest your weary legs. Don't get too comfortable behind that silken veil. Whispered secrets could unravel empires. A chamberlain recounts a quirky tidbit. Ibrahim purportedly decreed that every palace musician must compose a love song at midnight, sung barefoot on marble floors so that the music echoed through hidden passages to his bedchamber. You press your ear to the door, imagining haunting melodies drifting like smoke through oak-paneled corridors. Whether these whispers of midnight minstrels were real or palace, rumor remains uncertain, so elusive that even modern scholars debate the veracity of these nocturnal concerts. Yet darker stories shadow the Sultan's name. European envoys wrote of public wedding processions, staged for his favorite concubines, opulent spectacles where brides donned coronets of pearls and rode gilded litter chairs through the palace, greeted by cheering eunuchs and enthralled guards. Mainstream sources record that one such procession in 1644 lasted 3 days, requiring grain shipments diverted from Anatolian provinces. You shudder at the thought of starving peasants so distant as you sip your sherbet. Then there's the infamous bride market, where Ibrahim allegedly auctioned members of his harem to the highest bidder among his courtiers and foreign merchants. You picture a raised wooden platform draped in white linen, on which terrified young women stood under lantern light while brokers hammered gavel echoes that sounded like distant cannon fire. Fringe reports exaggerate that some women sold for the equivalent of a princely fortune in gold, yet others went for a handful of copper coins, an exchange so dehumanizing it still stings. Centuries later, you tighten your cloak as the palace wind carries the faintest echo of a weeping woman, perhaps a heartbroken concubine exiled from favor that morning. Historians still argue whether these auctions occurred at all or were fabrications meant to scandalize and delegitimize his rule. The truth blurs like watercolor in the rains of time, leaving you uneasy and eager to continue. Ahead lies the Murad, 3 pavilion where Ibrahim's most secret rituals unfolded. A gilded basin filled with rosewater bubbles quietly in the corner, and silk hammocks sway in the gentle breeze. Here, he is said to have bathed with his favorites, feeding them honey-glazed dates and watching as they drifted in perfumed waters. You envision petals floating like tiny boats, each carrying a whispered promise, and wonder if any boat ever reached shore with its occupants safe. But political missteps fanned the flames of dissent, faster than the Sultan's flames of passion. By 1648, famine and rebellion gripped Anatolia, while the Imperial Council used his eccentricities as proof of unfitness. In a swift coup, they had him removed, stripped of his robes, and confined to the old palace, where he died of neglect just months later in September. A mainstream datum, his formal deposition date, August 8, 1648, marks one of the most abrupt ends to an Ottoman reign. You step back, recalling the cool marble and warm sherbet, the laughter and the tears, and the sense that power and desire are combustible twins. As you leave Topkapi's shadowed walls, the scent of orange blossom lingers, and the distant call to prayer still echoes, a reminder that even in a world of silk and secrecy, human longing can topple thrones. Behind you, the hidden passages whisper their own farewell, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. You find yourself drifting away from the palace, footsteps growing lighter as the night air cools and the distant minarets recede into soft silhouettes against the sky. The scent of orange blossom fades into a gentle calm, replaced by the subtle rustle of olive branches and the hush of desert breezes that have whispered secrets for centuries. Each breath feels slower now, as though time itself is pausing to let you exhale fully, releasing the weight of gilded halls and whispered scandals. World softens around you. Tiles of sapphire and turquoise blur into watercolor dreams, and marble columns become quiet guardians of memory. You might recall Caligula's torchlit orgies in Rome, or Henry VIII's candlelit banquets at Hampton Court, Edward II's moonlit tunnels of love, or the rose-perfumed boudoirs of Louis XV, each tale a thread in the tapestry of human folly, woven together by flickering candlelight and whispered corners. Now, let those vivid images drift gently from your mind, like petals floating downstream in a quiet garden. The echo of clinking goblets and silk-rustling gowns recedes into a hushed murmur, softer than the wings of a nightingale. Remember that every throne, no matter how lavish, once stood silent beneath a star-sprinkled sky, and every ruler, however grand, was as vulnerable as you are now to longing, to laughter, and to the simple beauty of stillness. There is comfort in knowing that history's most outrageous excesses belong to the past, safe behind museum glass and parchment pages. Here in the present moment, you are free to close your eyes, breath unfettered, and let the cool night air lull you toward rest. Feel your body soften, your mind unfurl, and allow a gentle smile to rise as the hush deepens. Soon, even this whisper will fade into silence, leaving only peace and the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. So turn off the lights, nestle into warmth, and embrace the quiet that follows the storm of stories. Your journey through time is complete for now, but the calm that awaits is the greatest treasure of all.